Support for this program comes from Jazz on the Tube, the internet's largest collection of free streamable classic jazz videos. From Miles Davis to Louis Armstrong, from Thelonious Monk to Duke Ellington. You'll find it all on jazzonthetube.com. Start your free subscription today.
Hi, and welcome to Jazz Talk, a Jazz on the Tube podcast. My name is Ken McCarthy, and this is where we talk with people who are doing important work that supports and illuminates the music we love. The writers, the scholars, the educators, the filmmakers, the producers, and more.
Hey, everybody. Today we're talking with somebody that I've actually wanted to have on for a long time, and I was too shy to ask him, and finally I got over my shyness, and I said, I'm going to call him. We're talking with Shawn Wilson. Welcome, Shawn.
Hey, thanks again. I love being here.
And the first thing I want to do is let people know the name of your YouTube channel, and so right off the bat, people know what we're talking about. So what's the name of your YouTube channel, Shawn?
My YouTube channel is Shawn Wilson Piano, S-E-A-N, same as my name, spelled same as my name, Shawn Wilson Piano.
Got it. And your last name is spelled S-E-N.
Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That's cool.
And by the way, and it's Shawn Wilson Piano on all different platforms. So whether it's social media, any other social media, TikTok, Instagram, it's going to be all the same thing. It just makes it simple that way. So Shawn, S-E-A-N, Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N, Piano.
Gotcha. On all platforms. That's good. Love TikTok. You can get Shawn in TikTok.
Yeah, I'm at TikTok doing my thing over there as well. Trying to figure out the platform, but we're doing it.
Good. So I'm going to tell you who I think your channel is for, and then I want you to say, "Hey,
okay.
we need to expand that definition. Whatever change you need to make."
Okay, yeah,
First
sure.
of all, if you're a jazz piano player, and we got a lot of, because we're a jazz channel, we got a lot of jazz piano players. You must go to Shawn's channel. Like. It's not even a question. You've got to see this thing, okay? If you love jazz piano as a fan, you must go to Shawn's channel. Now, he's deep in the pool. Like, he's going to throw you deep in the pool technically. Don't get intimidated. Let all those technical things just wash over you. But enjoy the musicians that he's discovered and enjoy his enthusiasm for creative harmony. Okay, even if you can't understand a single word he's saying technically, you have to experience this channel if you love piano. And I would also say for any musician, for anyone that loves jazz, if you want to understand the essence of jazz, and that's what we're going to get into in a second, you've got to understand what Shawn is showing us. Okay, so Shawn, I'm going to go now on a long global explanation of the significance of your work. Okay.
Wow, this is amazing. You've done your homework here.
So. We jazz fans are told the history of jazz started in New Orleans, went to Chicago, went to New York. Okay. And it started in Storyville and it came out of the bordellos and all that. Okay. There's an element of truth there. There was some work in New Orleans in the bordellos. That's true. A lot of musicians did go from New Orleans to Chicago. And then New York, because it's the Big Apple, had all this networks, the radio networks, had all the recording studios. This is pre-LA. Well, of course, if you're an ambitious person, you're going to go to New York City. So that part of the story is kind of true. But there's two parts of the story that are really missing. Number one, I'm not a baseball fan. I don't hate baseball or anything. I just don't
right.
I got other things to do. I'll watch basketball first, right? But I remember in the ancient times, the New York Yankees were it. And some people love them, some people hate them. That's irrelevant. But they were it. But the New York Yankees weren't all born in New York.
Right.
They came from every corner of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth about jazz too. Yeah, maybe everybody for a certain period of time all ended up in New York, but they came from Florida, the Adderley brothers, right? They came from Indianapolis, the Montgomery brothers. They came from Pittsburgh. They came from Fort Worth. They came from everywhere. They came from small towns like the great Eddie Durham, who a lot of people don't know about, the guy that invented electric guitar and taught Charlie Christian, was the music director for Count Basie. Pete Lunsford. He grew up way out in nowhere, like in the outback of Texas, in a town He
Right.
he hunted rattlesnakes. That's what his hobby was as a child. Okay. So
Right.
jazz came from everywhere, not New York, not just Chicago, not just New Orleans. But the second piece that's missing is jazz came from the church. That music, that intelligence, that ingenuity, that creativity, that fire absolutely came from the church. Now, when some people tell the history of jazz, they say, well, jazz, was field songs, and they call it Negro spirituals, that old term, and, blah, blah, as if it were as if, gospel music was some ancient thing in the distant mists of jazz history. Yeah, gospel is still the church, and church music and church people and gospel music is still fueling jazz to this moment.
Right.
This is my opinion. I may be all wrong, Sean.
Right.
But,
no, you're right.
All right, good. So that's why I say this is what you do is of global importance. We have on one of the many things we have on our site. We have every jazz festival. We have every jazz academic program. We also have every jazz club in the world in the U.S. So we did a count.
Wow.
We roughly estimate there are 215 jazz clubs in the United States. Sean, I have a feeling there are more than 215 churches that are playing gospel music.
Yeah, I would think. Oh, yeah, definitely. One on every corner. In most large cities.
Right? We're probably talking thousands.
Yeah, for sure.
Even in this modern secular age, the church is strong, church music is strong. So we got to do the law of large numbers. If there's 215 jazz clubs and thousands of churches doing gospel music, I'm going to call it gospel music, every Sunday, it stands to reason by the law of large numbers, like the pyramid, right? There's some churches that are good, they're okay. There's some that are pretty good. There's some that are really good. And then there are some, just numerically speaking, that are going to be on another planet musically.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and these are the folks that are still fueling jazz. This is not something that happened in the 1910s. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So what Sean has done, or what Sean does, and why his work is of great importance to every jazz musician, is he's like an explorer of the gospel world, especially the keyboard world.
Right.
He goes out and he finds these amazing geniuses of the piano who just happen to express themselves in church on Sunday. Not everybody can be a touring musician or even wants to be. Some people get their opportunity for expression in church. And the standards for music in some churches are really high, right?
Oh, very.
They want the best of the best of the best of the best, and they get it. But there's this divide, so if you're a jazz fan, you see the jazz clubs, the jazz radio stations, the jazz albums, and you're like, oh, these guys are great piano players or keyboard players. But if you don't have access, as Sean gives us, you don't know that there's this other universe, actually probably a larger universe, people that are performing miracles on the keyboard.
Wow.
And
I love how you put that.
Well, yeah. And Sean's going out and finding them and featuring them and talking with them. And then also for those that aren't afraid of the technical stuff, getting into the technical things.
Right.
So is that a fair description of what you're doing?
That's a very, you hit it right out the park on that in baseball terms. Yeah, I feel like you did that. For sure. I like your analogy between the jazz and also the gospel, because traditionally a lot of players who play in churches have also played in your jazz clubs. And so what we find, a lot of the musicians that I cover, they also tour with Chris Brown, and they also tour with Beyonce. They do both. And so what tends to happen is the sound that you have in your clubs and on tour is the same sound that's also brought into churches. For the most part, the musicians are fueling that. And so everybody that watches my channel, they want to find out, well, how do I get the, it's obviously it's directed, primarily to musicians, but they say, well, how do I get that sound? I want to do that stuff too. I want to do that too. So my channel is really it's really an exploration. And I think you use that word exploration, where I'm learning with the viewer. And I try to take that kind of a sense of things of I'm learning here too. Let's watch them together and watch me react to this person. And then from there, it's not strictly theory. It's more, here's what I think. And it's really personalized. And so that's why I kind of retain my name on it. Because it's really my personal opinion on what's going on here and how these sounds are coming out and all of that. So that's kind of what we do. Yeah. But I think you got to definitely hit the ball out.
Gotcha.
On that.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So I'm glad you mentioned the term reaction video. There's lots of reaction channels on YouTube and all kinds of things. But what makes Sean different is he'll hear somebody do something amazing on a video clip, then he'll sit down at the keyboard and go, I think he's doing this. Start fishing around and he finds it and he goes, oh wow, look at this. This is amazing. So yeah, Sean is a highly informed enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes this great. Let me ask this question. The people that watch your channel, just out of idle curiosity, are they primarily aspiring church musicians, or are they coming from the whole musical arena, as far as you know?
I thought when I first started, I think that was the goal, just to hit the aspiring church musician, which I am. I play for, multiple churches and have been doing for over 20 years. I've been playing, in churches. And so that's what it was. But I've been finding through comments and emails that it's everyone. It's singers, it's bass players. I have pastors. I have, pastors who are part of, for me, I have a membership site. And so we have people who are joined on that membership site. And I have a lot of pastors who are on that membership site. They want to understand music as well. So it's hard to say it's just aspiring musicians. We're reaching a lot of people. It's anyone who has an interest at all in the genre. I even have people who are watching my channel who can't play the piano. They say that they tune weekly. And I say, wow, that blows my mind, because I know I spend a lot of time, pretty much all my time. But I will say this, one of the things I say is that all music choices are from the heart. And I think what it is people want to understand the heart of it, because at the end of the day, I say that we make emotional decisions. And so I think when we speak that language, it appeals to a wider viewer than just the strict musician. Even non-musicians want to understand, why does that sound the way it does? And what is going on? And even if they can't understand what I'm doing on the piano, they still can identify with, they still like it. So I think that's kind of why we can appeal to, maybe non-musicians as well. So I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because it made me think of this, which is, yes, what some of these keyboard guys are doing is incredibly sophisticated, incredibly advanced, but it's all in the service of expressing feeling.
Right.
In other words, they're not saying, I want to create the most complicated music ever heard by mankind. No, that's not what it's about. It's I have a very specific feeling, and the only way I can express it is with this collection of notes and this particular progression.
Right.
But it's not like, oh, I'm a computer nerd guy who just wants to spin complicated things for the sake of it. Is that clear?
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. And in fact, a lot of the guys I've transcribed have actually reached out to me, and they've thanked me, and they said that I was able to represent their ideas and thoughts, which was really, especially at the beginning, really validated what I was doing, because I wasn't speaking the language of theory. And in fact, a lot of the gospel musicians grew up playing by ear. So even though they, from a technical side, they have all of that, sometimes they're lacking in the knowledge of what they're doing. And from a theoretical perspective, but they just know how they feel, right? And they know that they want to get a sound out. And so I'm trying to represent that as best as I can, to take what I think they're doing, and they're not able to do that. And I'm saying, well, here's what I think that they were going for. They were feeling this way. Maybe they had some dissonance here. There's some dissonance here at this chord, because there's a lot going on. And here there's not a lot of dissonance. So I love the language of music. It just excites me. It's something that excites me. So yeah, I like the way you put that. So I definitely would agree with that in terms of what you just said. Yeah, that's for sure.
And this is a really good point, language. All that technical stuff is just simply language to describe things. It's like, well, this is blue and this is green and this is yellow. I mean, that's technical. Those are technical terms too. And you could say those were technical. This is blue, green. This is light yellow, but it's applied to music. So, okay, this is a triad, right? This is a 7 chord, right? Now this is so interesting. The idea of self-taught.
Okay.
And why this works obviously it works for thousands of people. I think it's because of the structure of the whole thing, which is that every Sunday there's going to be a service, right? And so you go as a little kid and you hear all this great music. And of course, if some little kids are going to be on fire and say, I want to do this too someday. Right. So now they have an aspiration. We don't really see that in the rest of society.
Right, right.
Kids don't go to jazz clubs every week. They're not really being exposed to music. But within the context of a church that has embraced music, people, they're in the moms come, they're carrying their babies, they're hearing it, right? It's literally from the womb. So they are getting this incredible education, musical education, just the way we learn English. Like, I didn't take English classes when I was a baby.
Right.
I didn't study.
It's osmosis almost.
Suddenly I'm starting to talk. And I think if you're immersed in music, that happens. That happens. So you know what you want to, here's my point. And tell me if I'm right on this. Because you've heard so much music from infancy to now, you have ideas about what you want to say.
That's exactly right. I love the way you put that. And I don't know, I'm sure you and your audience have heard of Corey Henry, for instance.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, he's performed in Lingus, and he again started in the church, and so the tradition, particularly with gospel musicians, is that we're going to go to a church and we're going to every single week, like you said, we're going to see them playing, but there's not necessarily a hymnal. I mean, if there's a hymnal, we're not using it to that extent, right? Because you have to be able to play by ear. It's a must. So that the expectation is there. And then even though we're self-taught in a sense, but you do have to understand that the musicians that are there are usually helping out the ones that are coming up. So there is some mentoring as well going on. So what generally happens if those musicians that are mentoring are of a high caliber, then you get these really high caliber musicians. And that's actually what happened with Corey Henry and Travis Sales. A lot of these guys, their mentors happen to be some of the top guys who were playing out in these crazy jazz clubs, but they had the language of both worlds. They had the language of the church and the language of the clubs. And they had this language. And then as a kid, you're having to go every week. And you hear and so you're incorporating this, like you said, from young. And so you see these videos of Corey Henry out playing the organ, and he's 5, and everyone's amazed, but they don't understand this is happening all over. Right? All over. This is normal, right? And so this is just kind of that language. But like I said, I think I definitely agree with you. The weekly consistency of having to come every single week. There's very few gigs that are just, you're going to get that gig every single week.
Right.
But with the church, you're going to get it. And then depending on how tough the church is, I mean, you can go to some churches, and actually Corey Henry said this in one of his interviews. He said that there were so many people wanting to be that person playing that there's a lot of competition for the one spot. So now you have to go home and practice for 6 and 8 hours a day just to be able to be that person who I'm going to be the person. So that fuels this great competition and fuels this mastery of the language at a young age. And it's not coming in the traditional way, but it's still coming. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I think that's really what makes a really big difference with at least the people that I'm transcribing, the gospel musician. They kind of have that, I'm noticing, as a pattern between a lot of the high performing gospel musicians.
Gotcha. So they were in a church with super high musical standards. So they,
right.
So they were hearing from infancy, from babe in arms, they were hearing the most amazing music every week, and that's key. And then as you're a kid, as you start looking at things, you go, I want to do that too. And
exactly.
And then the other thing is, I think, jazz, especially jazz today, it's kind of like chamber music in a sense, like the audience is out there and we're up here on the stage and we're showing our beautiful music, which is a fine format. But church is something different.
Right.
You're connecting. You're there to connect with people. You're there to fuel the people.
Right. And we're expected to set what we call the stage. And so the emotional component of music is drilled from the beginning. I remember playing, just to give my own personal anecdote here, I was in college at the time. I was playing for a church. And I remember like during different offerings, I didn't really know what I was doing. I could play pretty well. But, I didn't, during offering and then during the prayer and I remember the pastor came to me afterwards and he says, man, I need you to do better about setting the stage. During offering, they need to give. I need you to play something that's going to help, help people feel good. And then during prayer, I need you to play something that's going to be kind of this worshipful kind of for music. And then when I'm talking, I want you to play some talk music. Don't distract from me, but just play something in the background. So we're taught all of that. And so we're taught how to that emotional influence and the emotional connection of the music to an audience. I think that happens best in that context of a church service, because you start learning how to do that better and better, because people will respond. The audience will respond when you're able to do certain things, and you find out certain chords that will hit people certain ways, and you find out other chords and they don't like them. So it's really an experimental thing, and then after you're playing for so many years, you just get the audience, you just get them. And Corey Henry shows that in one of his videos. It's a funeral he played for, and it has like 5 or 10 million views, and it seemed like he just had that audience in complete rapture. Like, but that was learned from church, because we have to have that direct connection to the emotional side, and to that. And so, yeah, it is a lot different than a strict performance, say jazz or classical. So I think I wanted to say jazz because gospel is kind of a derivative, right, of jazz. But
let's put it this way: when jazz is working, it has that spirit.
It has that too. Yeah, for sure.
And I think we need to get the configuration right. I think jazz is I think gospel and that whole world. Not just the genre of music, but that whole world of people getting together. And it happens to be in a religious context,
right?
Together every week, and music is the engine.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's the foundation, and jazz is just the cherry on the top that got commercialized. And I'm not taking away from jazz. It's like I run a jazz channel. I'm a jazz.
Right.
I got a lot of jazz friends, but I want to give credit where credit's due. And I guess the reason we're having this show and some stuff I've been doing recently is I want to set the record straight. Where is this just coming from?
Right.
It's not falling from the sky. It's not just falling off a tree. It's coming from a particular group of people in a particular setting that have a particular setup, the weekly getting together, the overriding importance of music. Now, you mentioned something really interesting. If I could go off into the details of this a little bit.
Sure.
There are phases to the service. Oh, first of all, let me say this. These services are usually long, right? These are not like 40 minutes and out.
Oh, no. We're talking 2 hours. Hour and a half, 2 hours, could be 2.5. Some Pentecostal service could run even longer, 3 hours. So they're fairly long, and the musician is generally going to be on the keyboard the whole time, and he's doing everything. He's running the whole service. So that's why musicians kind of get paid. They can live if they have 2 churches, you can pretty much live off those.
Well, 2 churches. That raises another interesting thing, and it's hard to get paid work as a musician in this modern digital age, but there's no substitute for live musicians in church.
Right. Because of the importance, the at least in the, at least in certain style churches. So it's not, and this is what I'm finding. It's not every church, but in particularly Black gospel churches, the demand for the demand for good music is very, very high. It's just through the roof. They just want just the best musicians, and competition is really tough. So when you have that, regular supply and demand, right? So if you have that strict, that great demand for great musicians, then, that pay is going to be usually pretty decent.
And so, sorry to interrupt, but the church needs great music, so they're willing to pay for it.
So they're willing to pay for it, right? Now that's not been and that's where you get into a lot of the arguments. Musicians will say, but my instruction is just go. If you're getting better as a musician and you want to get paid more, then you basically look for churches who really have that kind of high musical standard, and then you go there. So that's kind of what happens as a musician. That could be your path if you're trying to do it as a musician only. Then you just go find churches who kind of have that standard there, and and you try to get in, and you're gonna get in just like everybody else with a big line of people waiting. But that's where the competition is, because everybody wants to be paid well. So, and it's weekly, and it's a great thing. Like me personally, I do it. I get paid weekly for Saturday and Sunday, and so it allowed me to be able to do this channel, during the week. I didn't have to worry about that on weekends, and because I have a pretty good ear, I was able to pick up music pretty quickly. So I don't have to spend all week practicing the music. I can hear the music Friday, learn it by the next day, and use that week time to do things like this and things that I really, really enjoy. So,
well, yeah. And let's talk about the way one develops the ability to play by ear. So once you have it, but there's a process to get there. And
sure.
You always hear these miracle stories about he sat at the piano at 3 and he started to play. I think that's a little exaggerated. I think people have to spend time, whether they're 3 years old or 13 or 30 or 90 years old. There is a little learning curve where you learn to connect what you hear with what's on the keyboard.
Right. And that takes time. And there is a process to it. And the story, of course, they're always going to have the stories of people who appear to just get on the piano. But I can guarantee you that's not what happened. Usually they were immersed in the language.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably experimenting, and so by the time you catch them, it's, that's how it looks. People have said that about me. Like they'll hear me do a song and then they say, oh, wow, he could play it first time hearing, but they don't know that's not what's actually happening. I transcribe all my songs. There's work involved, And so I have these, even when I started my channel, I started in 2016, and it seemed like I came from nowhere, just because everyone's like, wow, because I was transcribing, in my first year, I was transcribing Corey Henry and Travis Sale in my first year. So everyone's like, oh, wow, he just came from nowhere and just did this. But no, I had 20 years of vocabulary building, all of that. So I do think that there is a process. And for me, and what I teach is, the process is building vocabulary like language. And in the same way that we build words, and those words form sentences, and then, we go up in grade school and we do more complex sentences, and we're able to communicate more effectively the more words we know. It's the same with music, but we have to start from little words, and those are your triads, and so we start, just being able to communicate. And so I think that's kind of how the process is, just kind of learning words and then learning how to string those words together, which I call horizontal harmony, or basically horizontal harmony and then vertical harmony. Yeah.
Gotcha. And two things. One, if we're going to have great music, musicians need time not only to perform, they need time to, the term woodshed, but shedding to me never ends, right? You're always, if you're serious, it never ends. So that just means, okay, there's a time when I'm on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's this other big piece of time that people don't see where I'm figuring it out.
Yeah. And I think people are surprised at how much time that takes with the musician. And that's where the discouragement comes in. because they'll come in and they'll be like, oh, something must be wrong with me because it's taking so long. And I'm like, no, that's you're doing it right, you know.
Right.
Doing it right. This is the process is a longer process, but the cool thing is it will stick with you. So it's like it's long term. So, you know, if you stick at it, you're going to remember it long term. And so you got to focus on the long term aspect of it.
I think because music is a branch of show business. It's a show.
Right.
You know, it's a church. You don't like it's all about the performance. That's what people are focused on, rightfully so.
Right.
And there's a nice myth that, oh, this guy's just a genius and he's like, oh, it's incredible. You know, he may be a genius, but he's a genius that has spent, I don't know, what would the ratio be for every hour of performance? How many hours of thinking and trying things out and working? It's called, the word practicing is used, but I think practicing is a very limited word because it implies that you're just going up and down your scales. It's more of an inquiry. You're kind of doing inquiry on your own. Like, oh, how did Corey Henry do that? Oh, there it is. Oh, I see what he's doing. You know what I mean? That's kind of what you do.
Yeah, I you know, when you gave that analogy, I pictured the iceberg. You've seen the picture with the top of the iceberg is what you see in terms of when they're performing. Everything else happens underneath, you know, all the other stuff there. I mean, it's a lot, and like you said, which is a great comment. It's not just going scales. It's actually having to think about the music, thinking about, you know, doing some ear training, maybe, you know. Studying jazz on the tube, maybe, you know, but it's a lot of stuff involved with that process, and even finding out what you like and don't like. I always say that music is an experimental thing, and it should never stop. You should never reach a point where you say, "Okay, I've got it." You're always experimenting and saying, "What is my sound?" And I think that's really what happens, because my sound is going to be different. What I particularly like and put out there has to come from me experimenting and listening to different things. And you know what? I like that. I'm going to take that. No, that's cool, but I think I'm going to reject that. And that process, all that happens in that practice, like you say. So it's a lot. It's a lot involved.
So to use a jazz analogy, Thelonious Monk sat down at the piano and he came up with his thing. Completely different.
Yep. And he had his own sound.
And one of his best friends, Bud Powell, spent time on the piano, and he came up with a completely different thing.
Right.
And this is the essence of the art, you know. And so I think hopefully we've made this point that yes, these guys, whether they're in church or whether they're in Carnegie Hall or whether they're in a jazz club or a jazz festival, yes, they're talented. Some of them may even be geniuses, but what you're really looking at is highly intelligent, disciplined, dedicated people that are doing massive amounts of laboratory work on the keyboard to try to figure it all out. And then they show you the best stuff.
And they show you.
That's the performance. But everybody should know you're looking at somebody that's done a lot of work. Let's shift gears. And by the way, that's why I think in any setting, whether it's a jazz club or in church, if we want great music, we need to support the musicians financially. You know, the idea that a musician just shows up and fills an hour and we should just pay him for the hour. Well, okay, to a certain extent, I understand that. But you also have to understand there are hours and hours and hours of preparation that go into that. So I'm for paying musicians well in every component.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, but let's talk about something else. And believe it or not, this didn't dawn on me until really recently. I mean, I've heard this all my life, but it never sunk into my bones until last week. We've got gospel. We've got blues. These are not two completely separate universes that have no connection with each other, that have never talked to each other. Can you even, I'm starting to realize this, can you even, and I heard this from Glenn David Andrews. He's a trombone player from New Orleans.
Okay.
He said, that lady in the church, she may not be playing in the club, but she's playing blues in church.
Yep.
And let's talk about that. The blues gospel continuum, can you even divide them? Are they really the same thing in just different places? What do you think about this topic?
It's a very, you're just going to have just a whole lot of different opinions on this topic, because there's not going to, I don't think there's one right answer,
Okay.
you know, for it. For the blues, I do know blues came first, but a lot of the gospel churches that started had both, right? And so there's a guy named Thomas Dorsey, and he's called the father of gospel, basically. And he was in Chicago, but he the area that he was in also did a lot of blues there. So he was the one who did the song. What was it? It's called I think "Precious Lord, Take My Hand," and he penned that song. It was one of the oldest gospel songs you could hear now. He's the one who created that song. You've also heard of Mahalia Jackson, probably. She was also around that same era. But blues had a huge influence on it. I feel like gospel was just a name for blues sung in churches, almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Blues put into a form that the church and the congregation could actually sing to.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I think it morphed. So it's not like this is what it is. It's kind of morphs.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of what happened. And so, but it morphed, as you came, closer to today's age, you have people like Thomas Whitfield, and you have your traditional choirs. So they just took that same sound started by Thomas Dorsey, and they just adapted it to churches.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to remember also, those musicians are still playing in your jazz club. See, so I think it's really a big hodgepodge. It's not just one thing. It's coming from a lot of morphing and a lot of musicians being in various things, and again being adapted to what the audience, because there's still a market there. See, the market determines a lot. So if that church is feeling it, and if the records are selling, and the churches are buying those records, that's actually pushing that sound, the sound that we currently have, right? So I see it as, blues as being morphed, like a kind of adapted, a sound that's just kind of adapted for churches, if that makes sense. And then they changed the name to gospel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but you might find this interesting. There's a bass player who makes his living as an engineer, and he's also a scholar, named Vic Hobson. He's from England.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's written 2 books about the life of Louis Armstrong, but specifically the education of Louis Armstrong.
Okay.
And there were a couple of things that really jumped out that I think everybody needs to know. First of all, Louis Armstrong went to public school. Now, public school ended at age 10 in those days. At 6th grade, it was done. But there was public school. And they had singing every day in school. And there was a little book, and they were learning a basic form of solfege.
Oh, okay.
In grammar school, way back then. Now, I've talked to a lot of older New Orleans musicians, like one fellow, sorry, I can't remember. He passed away recently at 104.
Okay.
And then I have another friend in Cuba who's over 90.
Okay.
And they all say the same thing. When they were learning, this was secular, not in the church. When they were learning music, they had to learn solfege before they were allowed to touch an instrument. They had to learn to sight read before they were allowed to touch an instrument, which might be, do you know that what's it called? The Hellfire Regiment. I can't remember the right name of it, but there was this regiment in World War I that went to France and basically introduced American music, real American music, to Europe.
No, I hadn't heard that.
I think the guy's last name was, I'm just drawing a blank, but it's a really interesting part of jazz history. But anyway, when he wanted to put his band together to go over and entertain everybody, he had to go to Puerto Rico to pick up a lot of his reed players because they were all good readers. So I seem to be going off on a tangent, but let me bring it back down. So Louis Armstrong had this kind of foundation in what the notes were, right?
Okay.
But he talks often. You can find him often talking about the influence of the church on him and how important it was. That he says straight up, it all comes from the church. All American music coming from the church. Louis Armstrong says that.
Hmm.
But there's one other piece. I hope I don't forget what that piece is. Oh, Louis Armstrong, to his last day, thought of himself as a singer first, who happened to play the trumpet.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Now I'm going to pull this all together finally. When he was a little boy, he was part of a 4-boy singing group, and they would go out on the street corner and try to make some money. And he was proud because he said of all the boy groups in New Orleans, we were the best. Okay. Now in a 4-part group, you've got the bass, the alto, the
bass, alto, tenor, soprano. Yeah.
Yeah. And his job in his group, so there was one guy's got to do the melody, right? His job was to improvise, to play off the melody as a singer. That was his job.
Yeah.
One of the mysteries of Louis Armstrong is, he gets arrested as a kid. He gets sent to juvenile home. He picks up a bugle and all of a sudden he's playing great music. Well, that doesn't make sense. He must have had something. He had already been a really good singer and harmonizer as a child. And then I learned that Jelly Roll Morton sang in a boys group. This was not like a school thing or even a church thing. This was like, now people go and play basketball.
Right.
In those days, pre-TV, pre-radio, maybe not even records. Nobody could afford records back then. Where are you going to get your music from? Right, hey, let's get together and make sounds together. So here's what Vic Hobson says, and he's got some historical precedent. He says there was one guy that was traveling the South in the 19th century, 1880. And he said, wow, seems like 3 out of 4 boys and young men in the South are part of an informal singing group. I mean, it was everywhere. So Louis Armstrong was in a group. Jelly Roll Morton was in a group. Earl Father Hines was in a group. The great Sidney Bechet. All of these people, in addition to their church background, were also singing, because a lot of them, you couldn't afford instruments when they were kids.
So they use their voices.
And by fooling around with the tones, because there was no YouTube, there was no Sean Wilson to help. There was no Berklee School of Music.
Right.
They figured it out themselves.
Wow.
And he believes, and I think he's right, there's often this thing that, well, jazz is European harmony. And he says, no, jazz is African American harmony. They invented a variation of harmony.
Right.
These millions of people all over the country getting together and figuring it out. And that's the blues.
That's powerful. I love how you said that.
And here's something really interesting too. I'll find these quotes and I'll send them to you. So there's proof of this, because some of the European composers would say, wow, we're really inspired by these American harmonies. This is making us hear music like the way we've never heard it before. It's not that, I don't think it's that Americans took European, I mean, that was the base, the European harmony and the instruments and so on and so forth. But I don't think they took European harmony and changed it. I think they took the elements of the 7 tones, the 12 keys, and made their own version of harmony. And I think from that comes gospel, from that comes blues, from that comes jazz. I even think country, and I want to bring up this country issue now.
Okay.
Let's face it, a lot of these churches are in the countryside.
That's true.
These are country people.
Right.
And so it goes even deeper. It's not just that the church is the source of much of the sophisticated music we're hearing. It's country church people.
That's a good point.
Because we have this weird notion that, it's only New York City. That's where the sophisticated people are. That's where the educated people are. That's where the intelligent people are. And then they're at Harvard and they're here and there. No. Intelligence is where it is, and it's where it's used. And so I want to say to people, and what I love about you is, again, you're the window to this world that most of us, I'm a Catholic, so I went to Catholic church. We went every Sunday.
Right.
Services were about 40 minutes and people couldn't wait to run to the parking lot. That's a joke that everybody will agree with who's in that world. and we might have a guitar player that would play one song.
No organist.
Oh, not in our church, and so I have no access. I have no experience of this world. I've seen it in the movies. I've heard about it. I get a flavor of it. But so you going deep in and showing us that, hey, there's thousands of these guys out there. Just because you haven't seen them in a club or heard them on a record or seen them at a festival doesn't mean there's not amazing music being produced. So I think we want to look at, and I think it's true that a lot of jazz got developed in the big cities, or a lot of let's call it the music. We won't even call it jazz. We won't call it gospel. We won't call it blues. We won't call it country. We'll call it this American music that has all these different streams coming into it. Surely a lot of it got developed in the big cities, but we're really missing the boat if we don't realize how much of it come from the church and how much of it came from country people, not in the ancient past, but right now, 2023. And so to bring this full circle, Sean is the guy who's opening the door for us and showing us all these musicians and all the amazing things that they're doing. So, and the site again is Sean Wilson Piano.
Sean Wilson Piano. And my website is also the same as well, SeanWilsonPiano.com.
Great. And all the social media. And Sean is spelled the Irish way, S-E-A-N.
The Sean Connery way.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Sean Wilson. And then the last thing before we go is we haven't talked about, we know that you play in church, yes, but we don't know, I'd love to know your story. Like, where you're from, how'd you get to where you are? What was your, growing up? And
yeah, real quick, how much time do I have? 2 minutes? I can give a 2-minute version here because I see the time.
However long or short you want to do it is fine.
Yeah, I grew up at so you've heard of Take Six, right?
What's that?
Take Six. Have you heard of the singing group, Take Six?
My ignorance is boundless. I don't never heard of them.
Okay, so they're a group. They've won a couple Grammys, but they're an a cappella only group. Okay. And they're based out of Huntsville, Alabama, and that's where I grew up. In that same environment, because they were it was a church environment. They went to a school that was connected to that church, so it's kind of like a church, like a religious institution that has schools, and you can go up to college. So that's kind of what I did. Even though I didn't have formal music training, I had everything we talked about in today's session, basically being surrounded by great musicians. If you've heard of Brian McKnight, if you've heard of Little Richie, they all came from this particular school called Oakwood, and that's Huntsville, Alabama. So that's where I grew up. And my father also was an organist, and he played for the church. And I would remember hearing jazz chords from him when I was younger. I didn't know what he was doing, and and by the way, he never taught me, he never showed me anything. He sent us to training, but that early influence of having been exposed to that high level, I think actually developed my ear. And so when people ask me, Sean, how'd you get that ear? That's the only thing I could really say, is that I grew up in this rich musical environment, and I was surrounded by really great musicians. And then of course, even when I was, I think I started when I was I was probably still in high school, and I started playing for the churches. And then, so, from there until I left church, and then just continued after that, I became a math teacher, believe it or not. So after I graduated college, I went to and got my degree in math education. So I was teaching math during the day, and then also playing for churches on weekends. Something that I did up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when I quit my teaching and decided to do this full time. So right now I have 3 kids, 3 boys, and I live in Florida right now, and I'm enjoying this hot weather, but waiting for it to go down during the winter. So that's the really abbreviated version of what I'm doing. But yeah, we're Florida. I'm based out of Florida right now, around the Orlando area. And I just basically, this is all I do. And I'm so glad, that God has given me this ability to be able to make a living off of something that I really enjoy, which is just going through the music process, like I said, and finding people And people will send me, at this point, I get hundreds and hundreds of emails where people say, hey, have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? And I get to, look and see which one I want to break down and which one I want to cover. And then I show those on my channel. And then and some of these people, I've got 16-year-old kids on there that'll play circles around people. I mean, you should see some of these people on the channel. And I break them down, and every once in a while, the people will contact me, and that forms great relationships. I've been able to talk to some of the greatest musicians. It's just been just been a great thing, and it's also a great honor being here on your channel and just being interviewed by you as well. So, but yeah, that's my story. So I just thank you again for inviting me. Just love the conversation.
Great, and you do great interviews too with musicians.
I do. I interview music. I have another guy coming up, Randy Jenkins. He's coming up on Monday, and I've interviewed some great musicians. I got to interview Kanye West. Kanye West, not Kanye, but Kanye's music director when they came out with the Sunday Church Choir, the person who put that together. We were able to interview him. And the cool thing about the interviews, we go from a music perspective, since most of the people who have signed up to me are musicians. So I'm asking them questions like, what do you do? How do you practice? What are some of your favorite chords? Mm-hmm. Give me a song. Can you give me an actual song? And we'll actually look at that. And I put a portion of it on YouTube, but I put the full thing on my website. So, those people that are signed on to me, they can see those full versions. So we have lots of great interviews there as well. Actually, Beyonce's musician, Victoria Theodore, she used to play for Beyonce. I saw Beyonce did the song "When You Wish Upon a Star," "When You Wish Upon a Star," and I said, "Man, this is an amazing arrangement." And I went and found out who that musician was, and she, come to find out, she wrote a comment on my YouTube channel, and I was just blown away I said, "Wow, this is the creator of the song." She came and made a comment and actually said, "I love your work, Sean. Love what you're doing." And she sent me her email, and I reached out to her, and she actually came and provided an interview on my channel. So just the ability to have people reach out to me, and after I pick my heart up off the floor, I continue the interviews, and so I've been able to meet some amazing people. So it's been just amazing. It's been a wild ride, but it's been great.
Wow. So people know there's a public side available for free to everybody, and where you can have a lot of fun and learn a lot. And then you have a school on the other side where you go deep. And it's all good. So the math education world lost a star, but the music education world got a star. And you said two things. I want to just, and then we'll close out. People probably don't think, you see Beyonce, you see Kanye, you see the guy up front. Mm-hmm. But that's what it's all about. It's show business.
Right.
You've got to know there are some sophisticated people running the operation musically.
There you go. And see, that's what I like to highlight, because a lot of people don't understand that world. They only see the performer, but they know they love it, but they can't do it without those musicians. And those are the people who I'm covering. It's those people who are behind Beyonce, behind Kanye, and those people who make them sound the way they do. I love that. Now, a lot of that gets into the producing side of it, so I don't so much cover the production side of things. I cover more of the harmony and the melodic side.
The arranging.
The arranging, yeah. So I'm on that side. So, those musicians who play for those people, I really would love for them to get more shine and more spotlight. And so that's why when I cover those people, I say, this person played for Beyonce, but their name is Victoria Theodore. I want people to know, because they're hearing the music, Beyonce singing with it, but she sounds good because of the backdrop of that music. Without it, it's not going to sound, she's not going to sound as good. It's that music that's making her sound so good. And that world is the thing that I think I'm exploring and you're exploring. And that's what the world that we're, really exploring. So great point there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last thing is about, sometimes you get education from your parents, but surprisingly, not always. Mm-hmm. I happen to know Chico and Vaughn Freeman, great tenor players from originally from Chicago. Okay. And I remember Chico telling this story. I asked my dad, how are you getting that sound? He said, I'm not telling you. You got to figure out your own sound. It took me 40 years to make this sound. What do you?
Yes, my dad said the same thing.
And I have another friend, Aurora Nealand, who's a great reed player down in New Orleans. And her mom was a piano teacher. And she went to her mom, well, Mom, show me how to play the piano. She said, you got to teach yourself. Now that may seem cold, but self-reliant, self-directing. Okay. And you do get teachers, you do get mentors, and you do, it's not like you never heard anything from anybody, but you break that spoon fed. You're my son or you're my daughter. I'm going to spoon feed you. And no, I want you to go out into that big world out there and find it.
Yep. Yeah. That's powerful. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sean, I'm not joking when I say at the beginning, you're one of my heroes, one of my musical heroes because of what you're doing. And I'm so glad that you could take some time and share this with us. And everybody, SeanWilsonPiano.com, Sean, S-E-A-N, not the other way, S-E-A-N, WilsonPiano.com on every platform, including TikTok. Again, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. If you are a piano player, you must go to Sean's channel. Like, you just have to do it. And we're all jazz people on this channel. If you love jazz piano, I'm going to say, even if you don't play, you got to go see what Sean's doing. Don't worry if you get lost in some of the language, but catch the spirit of it. And I'll say any jazz fan, I'll say anybody that loves human creativity, anybody that wants to know the true story of American music, the full story and the engine behind it. Sean's the porthole. He's the doorway into this beautiful, beautiful world. So thank you for bringing it to us.
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you having me here.
Okay. We'll catch each other later, I hope.
Okay. Thanks again.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please share it. That's how we grow. And remember to subscribe to JazzOnTheTube.com, the internet's largest collection of free, streamable, classic jazz videos.